Today, we have started last week into our study in Romans, and today we're going to be picking back up in Romans 1. Romans is a very deep and challenging letter in the Bible, there's a lot that we can gather from it and a lot that we can learn. And one of the things that we're going to talk about today is brokenness. Brokenness. The world itself is broken. I don't know if you saw this or not, and it's okay if you didn't, because I'm not going to say that I sit around encouraging everybody to just watch the news like news junkies. But last night, there was a White House Correspondents' Dinner, and at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, there was a man that rushed in with a pistol, with a shotgun, and several knives, and as he came in towards the White House Correspondents, he just started firing a shotgun. He hit one of the police officers. Don't know exactly which direction he was going into there, but they cleared the president and the vice president and all the people out in a hurry and everything, and they arrested the guy. Now, let me speak about a broken world. Dependent upon, because I get fascinated, and again, I'm not wanting you to do what I do because I too am broken, mentally, probably. But I like to go on different news outlets and just see different takes on the same thing. And some news outlets were like, well, we need to determine, the most important determination about this act is this man a Democrat or is this man a Republican? This is the most important thing that we need to discern, is who does he represent politically? Because if he represents one politically, then it probably makes sense because the president has been saying so many crazy things and it makes sense somebody would want to kill him. If it's the other party, then it makes sense that he probably wasn't there for the president. He's probably there to kill some of the press because of the media and stuff like that. And then you can watch the news and you can watch people's comments and stuff like that. But what nobody wanted to address in the broken world is the act itself. Because what's more important than the act itself is we need to know the reason so we can determine whether we justify the act. See, this man went in there, whatever his reasoning, with the intent to murder. The act is wrong. But in the world that we live in the broken world that we live in, we need to know reasons, because if the reason's right, we will justify the sin. And we do it on every level in our life, inside our own homes and outside of our homes. And that is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a broken world. But today, the good news is that Paul's going to share with us the power of the gospel in a broken world. Because that's got more power than the sin that's in this world. But we're going to look at the juxtaposition, we're going to look at the balance between the gospel and sin today. And so we are going to talk a lot about sin. Sin is one of those things in our life that's why we live in a broken world. And what we don't realize about sin is that when sin has us, that it imprisons us. We don't realize we're in prison. We think we're in charge when we allow sin in our life. If any of you have ever seen her, I apologize. Let me start there. But if any of you have ever been over to my house and you've seen what we call a dog, Coco. She's a Yorkie, but me personally, I think she's more raccoon than dog. But if you are around her and you know anything about animals, they have their own personality. They have their own personality, and Coco at our house thinks that she rules our house. Like she'll jump on, sit on anything that she wants. What's really funny is if you take her walking, she's a small, even for a Yorkie, but you put her on her leash, and she thinks that she is like one of these snow dogs, like she's just going to pull a sled and she'll be just clawing at the ground because she'll want to go in somebody's yard or something, even though she's on a leash. And if she starts, if it happens to be the direction we're going in, she feels like she's pulling me in the direction that she wants to go. She thinks in her attitude that she's completely in charge. Even if I'm the one that's directing the leash and we're going to take the path that I want to take regardless, she thinks she's the one that's directing it. And in our life, that's how we are with sin. There's a leash around our neck and we think we're completely in control. We think that, okay, listen, it's not that big a deal if I watch these movies that have sex in them, because that little bit's not affecting me. I'm in control of what sin is allowed in my life and what sin is not. I'm in control of what I do and what I don't, and I will determine that. And we don't ever think that there's this leash on us and that we're being directed and that it's starting to consume us. We think that we're always choosing the path that's right for us, but it leads to more and more brokenness. So today, we're going to look at the gospel and we're going to look at brokenness. The first thing we're going to look at is the gospel is God's power to save. In Romans 1:16 through 17, it says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jews first, and also to the Greek. For in the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith, as it is written, the righteous shall live by faith." Paul had said before that he was an apostle, that he was sent by God, and that he was set apart. That he was set apart for the purpose of the gospel. And now we're talking about the gospel. The gospel is not merely advice. It's not just inspiration. It's God's saving power for any who believe. Paul later on writes to the church in Corinth in 1 Corinthians 1:18 that for the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to those who are being saved, it is the power of God. It's folly. It's folly to those that are hearing it in the world. It's folly to people because they believe in what they believe. It's like a kid when they become a teenager. You have seen enough life to know that if they do this, then some certainly is going to happen here. But when you try to tell your teenager and give them advice, they know everything in the world already. They were born with a complete download of every bit of information that they need, and they don't want to listen to what you have to say. It is a mixture of emotions for me with my daughters at times, especially my baby, because she will be going through something that's hard. She will do something that I advised her not to do. She will do it anyway, and then she'll go through it, and then she'll be crying, and she'll be seeking advice, and then somewhere in there she'll say, "Dad, you were right." Now, those emotions are, I'm heartbroken for what she's going through, but there's a little celebration dance inside because I knew I was right to start with, right? Like, you knew you were given proper advice, but they're not listening to it because it makes no sense to them. The world, the gospel makes no sense to them. All they see is that there's judgment and sin, and we're going to talk about that because sin is real and there's real consequence to sin, but they don't see the saving power of the gospel because it makes no sense to them. But that to those that encounter God and they give their heart over, it is the only truth. It is the only real truth in the universe, in the world. In Acts 4:12 it says, "And there is salvation in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved." The gospel is the means by which we are saved. Imagine, if you would, if it was this easy, if you could go to a doctor and there's something going on with you and he tells you about the cure. Well, telling you about the shot that you need or the procedure you need or whatever, if just the explanation was enough to be cured, then you wouldn't have to go through it. But that's not the case. They can explain all they want, but until it's applied, until the surgery is done, until the vaccination is given, until the shot's there, until whatever it is applied in your life, there will be no change. An explanation is not enough. And just to hear the words of the gospel, just to explain the gospel and not apply it to our lives is not enough. It is the cure when it is applied. And so Paul said, I'm set apart for this real salvation of men, because it's needed. 2, God's wrath is revealed against sin. In Romans 1:18, it says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. I want to always be before people and talk about how loving God is. I really do. And that is a true, it's not only a good message, it is a truthful message. If there is any love in this world, it ripples from God. God is love. The entire Bible is just one message of God's love to mankind. That is truth. And it would be so much easier. My call, my job would be so much easier if God was like, all I ever want you to talk about is my love. But you see, that's not a complete picture of who God is, because God's not only loving, God is holy. He is righteous. And we can't have this salvation if he's not. And because he's holy, that means that he can't tolerate sin. Sin can't even be in his presence. In Habakkuk 1:13, it says, you who are of pure eyes than to see evil and cannot look at wrong, why do you idly look at traitors and remain silent when the wicked swallows up the man more righteous than he? Psalm 7:11 says, God is a righteous judge and a God who feels indignation every day. What? Sin is serious. And what we do in our lives is we minimize that seriousness in our life because we want what we want. We want to walk the path that we want. We want to be in charge of our own lives. And so we decide that that's not a problem. Who is it hurting? Who is it hurting? When I go and I look at porn, that's not hurting anybody, because that's me and a computer screen. That's me and a magazine. When I go out and I get my drugs and I feed my addiction, I'm not at this point taking money from my family and not paying bills. It's not hurting anybody. It's just something that I decided that I want in my life. When I go and I cheat somebody else out of something, when I go and slander somebody else because the world is a dog-eat-dog world and I got to excel in my career, and so the only way that I can get a promotion is if I step on their neck, so I go behind to make sure that everybody knows that Patricia is not the one for this job, and I spread rumors or I lie, that's okay, because I need to feed my family and I need this raise. I make choices every single day in my life to make compromise with sin. Whether it's something I watch or listen to or I act in my life, I make a decision whether I want to or whether I can handle that or whether that's okay to be present in my life. And basically what I'm doing when I do that is I'm minimizing how God feels about it. And God can't tolerate sin. The gospel, the good news, the thing that we need in our life for salvation only makes sense when we realize the seriousness of sin. When we minimize sin, then the gospel makes no sense. That's why it makes no sense to the world. Me and Mary are watching a show together. And on this show, there are couples. And these couples, men and the women that are married to each other, they minimize their affairs. They're having like an affair with another person. They minimize it. And it gets me. Mary sometimes doesn't like watching shows with me because I get irate like at this. I mean, they're not showing anything physically or anything like that. But I get irate like these are real people and dealing with, like it's not fiction to me anymore. I'm like, how could she? Why is that okay? He should just leave her. And, I'm just getting all mad and everything. But the shows minimize the whole affair. Like, well, every once in a while, you just need to blow off steam. What? Right? Like, but that's the world that we live in when we minimize sin to such a degree. Nothing is sacred. Nothing. 3, the world suppresses the truth about God. In Romans 1:19 through 23, it says, for what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them, for his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Paul says there's no excuse for anyone. God's evident everywhere. And he is evident everywhere. You go outside and you start staring around, it's very hard to not see God's design. So many prominent intellectual people, scientists, who for majority of their life would just deny God's existence, that would lean into science is going to explain everything. They come to a realization that it doesn't make sense without a designer. One case in point is a woman by the name of Rosalind Picard. She got the highest honors at MIT for her, don't even understand what she does, to be honest with you, but she creates some kind of technology to register human emotion so that people like with Lou Gehrig's disease and stuff like that, when they're trying to translate stuff to the point where they can't communicate, it can read like their facial expressions and everything else so that they can communicate better. And she's designed some of this technology, but the point is that she spent most of her life as a proclaimed atheist. And the more that she studied science, the more she realized, in her statement, not my statement, but the more she realized that there was more there. And one of her statements was, I used to think that religious people had thrown their brains out the window. I used to think that people that went to church that believed in Christ had thrown their brains out the window. Back to that whole point, to the world, this makes no sense. Until they start encountering God. Because God's witness is everywhere. It's in everything. I don't care if you study cellular every word in the world is out of my head this morning. I don't care what you study, down to cells or to the stars, God's witness is everywhere. It's in everything. And that's what Paul's talking about. And so there's no excuse. We know that the God's there. We know there's a creator. And God has a standard by which he wants us to live. We have no excuse to not do so. In Psalms 19, 1 through 4, it says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are their words without voice is not heard. Their voices go out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tent for the sun. The problem is not a lack of evidence. It's our heart's resistance to God. That's the problem. In Acts 14, 16 through 17, it says, in the past generations, he allowed all nations to walk in their own ways, yet he did not leave himself without witness, for he did good by giving you rain from heaven and fruitful seasons, satisfying your hearts with food and gladness. It is our hearts that resist God. It's not that there is no evidence of him. There's not that there's no standard. It's us that refuse because we want to walk in our own ways. We want to do what we feel is right. We want to be our own gods. But rejection of God leads to more disorder. In Romans 1, 24 through 27, it says, therefore God gave them up in their lust of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason God gave them up to dishonorable passions, for their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. And the men likewise gave up natural relations with women, and were consumed with passion for one another, men committing shameless acts with men, and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. Here 3 times Paul says God gave them up to impurity, to dishonor, and debased minds. And what example he gives here is in their debased, impure ways, is that they were turned over to their desires, and sexually they started doing every sexual perversion that they could. They were given over to it. Proverbs 14:12 says, there's a way that seems right to man, but in the end it is the way of death. Once God gives them up, this is like a judicial term. It's like a judge that once somebody comes before him and all evidence has been presented, then he turns them over to the bailiff and has them led off to jail. God gave them over to their desires, and their desires ate them up. When I was reading this, I thought of something else. And maybe you had a similar experience. But when I was like 15 or 16, it doesn't matter if this is the case when I was 15 or 16, but always, you know what the coolest advertisement in the world is? If you ever watch Super Bowl, every year, Super Bowl, guarantee Budweiser is going to win that commercial. Right? They have the best commercials out there. They make it look like it's the coolest thing in the world. Who doesn't want to own a Clydesdale horse? Right? Who doesn't want to be cool like they make it look cool? And so when I was 15 and 16, not only advertisements, but movies, everything in the world that seemed like it was fun, everything in the world that seems like it's fun, people are drinking. And so when I was 15 and 16, man, we tried to sneak drinks as much as we could. We wanted to get a buzz. And when I did turn 16, I had one friend whose parents left for the weekend. And when they left for the weekend, we were able to get as much alcohol as we possibly could afford. We got all the money we could. We went to his family's cabin, and there we weren't just sneaking alcohol. We were drinking as much as we possibly could get down our throats. There was no more restrictions. That weekend, there was no guardians. There was no oversight. We were completely turned over to our desires. Oh, it was ugly. We got blackout drunk, throwing up everywhere. We caught the cabin on fire. We got sick beyond sick. our desire was to have this, and then when we had no restriction, we had no oversight, we had nothing to sin, and we were completely given over to just do as much as we want. It completely destroyed us and everything in our path. When God gives you over to, in this case, sexual desires, but when he gives you over to that desire with no oversight, with no God involvement, the desire will tear you to pieces. Sin only has one purpose, and that's to destroy. It is the way to death. And when God persistently reject God, they persistently reject him, he allows them to follow the path of their desires. In Jeremiah 2:13 it says, "For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and they have hewed out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that can hold no water." They have determined that they will do what they want to do. They will no longer have anything to do with me. What I have given, the cisterns that I have given, the jars, the containers for the living water that I provide, instead they will make their own, and they will do what they want. They will be their own judges. They will be their own gods. They will determine what they can and cannot accept, and I will give them over to it. And it will lead to their own destruction. Sin affects the whole person. And then he goes down this list of sins. In Romans 1:28-32, it says, "And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy and murder and strife and deceit and maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Though they know God's righteousness, they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practices them." Sin is not just some private thing, it affects the whole. So many times, like I was pointing out earlier, so many times we think that when we do something that it's not going to affect other people. It's not going to spill over into our families. It's not going to spill over into our relationships. It's not going to spill over into our jobs. I can do this because it only affects me, but sin never just affects the person. It affects the whole. In James 1:14-15, it says, "But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death." I can do whatever I want to do. Whatever I want to do. I can listen to whatever I want to listen to. Here is a truth that I hope that you will carry with you. You can be a good person. You can go to church all the time. You can read your Bible. But a truth about us is that we are vessels. We are vessels. And you should think of yourself as a vessel. Something that is going to be filled up. Think of yourself, if you will, as a glass. Now, or better yet, an example that I'm still mad about, because back there by the camera right there, I have a water bottle back there. That's not my water bottle with the little green top on it. I have a Yeti. But my daughter decided that she was going to put tea in my Yeti, and now my water doesn't taste right. So I got to get it just cleaned out just right. But you could put water inside that container. You could put tea inside that container. You could put juice inside that container. You could put whatever you want inside that container. We are a container. We're a Yeti. Whatever we put in is what's going to be poured out. She put tea in my Yeti. Now my Yeti tastes like tea. And no matter what I want, until that's very, very cleaned, it's not going to taste like anything else. I can want it to taste like something else, but it's not. In our lives, we can claim to be Christians. In our lives, we can claim to belong to God. We can claim to be good people. But if we fill ourselves with sin, we fill ourselves with crap, that's what's going to come out of our life. We can want all we want, but if we fill the container with other stuff, that's what's going to come out. No matter what our wishes are. And we choose what we put in. It's like a tree. If you've been to my house, you know I love trees. You look at a tree and it may look healthy. Trees don't die unless they're struck by lightning. Trees don't die at the branches. Trees die at the root. And they start decaying up underground and you don't see it. And by the time that you start seeing the evidence in the trunk and the branches and the leaves and everything, that tree's long gone. There's no saving it. Sin in our life is a lot like that. We think we have a control on it, and we allow it in, and we're like, oh, I can watch this, I can take this, I can be involved with this. It's not affecting everything, and on the outside it looks great. On the outside we look like we have our life all together. On the outside we look like we are doing outstanding, that we're blessed by God, that we're a shining light for Him. Everything looks great. But at our roots, it starts deteriorating. And our life starts becoming less and less fruitful. And then it starts affecting the trunk and the branches and the leaves, and by that time, our life's falling apart. Paul's message is a harsh one, but it's a good one. Don't minimize sin. God, who is a holy God, cannot tolerate sin. So don't sit there and try to justify the sin that we take in our life. God doesn't want it in our life. And when we take sin in our life and we sit there and we're going through something, because that's normally when we start questioning, why can't I hear from God? When we're going through something in our life and it's hard and we have a relationship problem, we have a work problem, we have any kind of problem that we're like, I need to hear from God, and I get down and maybe you felt this yourself or you heard somebody else say it, I'm praying, but I don't feel like I can hear God. I feel like I'm just praying to the roof and it's just bouncing back. I don't feel Him in my life. And I want to tell you, a lot of times it's because we have made concession for sin in our life. We have minimized it. We have allowed it in our life, and we're like, that's not a big deal because I can handle that. And it's taken root in our life. And here's what the Bible says about sin and God. Sin in our life and God. In Isaiah 59:2 it says, but your iniquities, that means sin, have made a separation between you and your God, and your sins have hidden His face from you, so that He does not hear. It's not that God's not listening, it's that our sin is separating us. We don't need to be asking the questions of like what the cause is, or what's okay. And I'm in danger of this a lot. When I tell stuff about myself, 9 times out of 10, y'all hear a story about when I was in the military or whatever. And so here's something that I do at my house that I'm always having to challenge myself on. I love military movies. Love them. I mean, I love them. Those are my favorite kind of movies, is military movies. Any of you ever watched a military movie? Yeah. You know what's involved in military movies? Lots of cussing. Lots of cussing, man. I mean, you can't be around military guys and they're not cussing. And it's not going to sell at the movies if there's not sex. in the movie, right? Like it's just not going to get a lot of audience if there's not sex. These military guys and women, they need to go out and they need to sow their oats and stuff like that. I love military stories so much, and I don't care what time period they are, by the way. The older they go back, sometimes it's more fascinating, but the more, like if we go back to like gladiator days, the more they feel like there needs to be more sex involved in the shows, right? But like, I love them, and so for the longest time, I would be like, nobody out here needs to know that I love these type of movies. Nobody else out here needs to know that I love Spartacus and that in the show that there's a lot of sex and everything. That's something that me and my wife can watch privately, and that doesn't affect anything. Doesn't affect anyone. Not one of you has the right to sit here in Reliance Church and judge me for what me and my wife decide to do in our own home. Am I right? Let's be Baptists all of a sudden. Say amen if I'm right. No. It affects me. And if it affects me, it affects you. Every concession that I make in my life that I'm like, I can handle that. Every concession I make in my life eats at my roots. And it affects the people that are around me. God cannot tolerate sin. The salvation against sin is the gospel, the good news. If you were in a burning house and I was out there with my megaphone and I yelled up to you in that house, Carolyn, your house is on fire and the fire is hot. That doesn't save you. As a matter of fact, it's going to make you mad. You realize the fire is hot. You know, the information of me telling you that the fire is hot doesn't save you. You need an act to save you, and the gospel is that act. It is the story about Christ. And it is Christ that saves us. The word for good news, I don't know if you realize this or not, there was no word for gospel before the gospel. The actual word that we use for gospel is a term that was normally, not always, but normally used in military terms. And there's one story in the Bible that is very accurate of where it would be shared, and that's the story of David and Goliath. But this good news, this word that's used, is when a military campaign, normally they would win, and then they would carry that winning news back to their country, to the other people. But a lot of times in ancient times, it was like the story of Goliath. They would have an army that was opposed to another army that may seem very equal. And what they do is they select one person to go out there to represent the entire nation. And then another person would be set to represent another entire nation. And two individuals would fight. And those individuals would fight, and they would agree upon the fact that if this individual wins, then we will surrender our nation to them and all our people, and a whole army doesn't have to die in the war. Well, the victor, whole army's sitting there with bated breath, the whole nation's sitting there with bated breath. Who's going to win? Who's going to win? And so when somebody won, they would send out their fastest riders to go out and spread the news. David killed Goliath. We have won. And it would be a victory that would be spread across the entire country, the entire nation, letting them know that because of one person's thing, that they have been saved. And that is the gospel in a nutshell. Because of one person's actions, we have been saved. It's because of Christ that sin no longer has to have a leash around our neck and lead us to destruction. because of him and what he did. And that is the good news. And that's what Paul says he's set apart for. Sin is serious, and it condemns sinners. But the gospel is powerful enough to save sinners. So this morning, thankfully, Tyndall didn't have to go to children's church this morning. Tyndall's going to come up this morning. And this morning, that is the news. The good news is that we have Christ. Yes, it is very true that we need not make any concession in our life for sin, and that's a hard message. It's almost like all the people that were traveling this week and having babies and sick, that they knew what the message was going to be about today. Because it's not one of those messages that you sit up here and you go, you know what, I believe everybody's going to walk out and pat me on the back and say, I love that message this morning, Pastor. But that's okay, because it's the most important thing that I could tell you this morning. Sin has no place in your life. The vessel that you are needs to be full of Christ. And if it is, then your life will be full indeed. Let us stand this morning.